Our next speaker, Jessica Groopman, is founder of the Regenerative Technology Project. She is a senior innovation advisor at International Futures, distinguished fellow at Regenerative and ambassador of Capital Institute. Jessica is also an innovation strategist and tech industry analyst. She is faculty at the Fast Future Executive. Please welcome Jessica.
Hi, everyone. That's sort of the perfect intro. Now for something a little different. So we've been talking about intelligence a lot today, but there's maybe other kinds of intelligences to bring into the question of the future of AI. Question I want to ask you, what happens when code meets nature? So let's start with this question. What do you think is more intelligent? Your smartphone or a tree? Every second, our digital world consumes more energy than entire nations. Data centers hum, AI models expand, code is powering and disempowering our businesses, our lives, our markets. But in the same second, a single forest processes infinitely more data and information and relationships across billions of organisms, all exchanging nutrients, energy, signals without ever overheating, without creating a single piece of trash or pollution, and without collapse. In fact, we might say, in our economic parlance, a tree compounds value by its very existence. A tree creates cascading multi-capital benefits, or we could also just say a tree regenerates. A tree contributes more to its ecosystem than it extracts from it. What does that mean? Well, a tree is food. A tree is an asset. A tree sequesters carbon from the atmosphere. A tree cleans the air. A tree firms up the soil and prevents erosion. A tree is habitat to hundreds of different species. Even a single leaf processes solar energy from the sun with about 90% uptake. That's compared to about 20% of our solar panels. So we can look at our technologies today and they're brilliant, but they're also brittle relative to this profound intelligence that we see all around, both in our bodies, we are nature, but also in the natural world. So if we turn our selfie around, we see another picture. We might call this our global selfie of where we stand today. This is actually the latest research out just a couple of weeks ago looking at 35 indicators of the foundations of social and planetary health for life out of Oxford and the University of Leeds. And what this picture shows is that we are already breaching 7 out of the 9 planetary boundaries. Only one of those is climate change, by the way. And it also shows that we are in shortfall of many different social foundations. In other words, millions of people around the world lack access to basic needs: clean air, water, shelter, education, health. When ecosystems fail, markets fail too. Why should we care? I've long been interested in our relationship to tech. Long before I was a technology analyst in Silicon Valley studying all the latest and greatest buzzwords in emerging tech, I was a paleoarchaeologist studying ancient stone tools of the Upper Paleolithic. And I learned, it turns out tech is kind of our thing as a species. We don't have very big teeth. We aren't very strong. We don't have a lot of fur, most of us. But we do know how to wield some technology. That is how we adapt in our environment. And today's tech is operating at planetary scale. Our digital infrastructure, our automation, these AI models, these are massive. So the big question I'm asking, the big question maybe we can ask in the future of AI is, how do we wield these technologies in a new way? In a way that tells the story of our species? What is the long story of our species in this moment with our use of artificial intelligence? What if our technologies learned from 3.8 billion years of R&D? For all of the talk and fanfare about artificial intelligence, we've actually forgotten about the most intelligent designer in all of history, life itself, nature itself. What if we used the brilliance of the natural world to train our AI, such that AI is not just learning from itself, or even just from us, but from the brilliance across the natural world, from mycorrhizal networks and distributed computing that exists and shares those nutrients under the soil, from coral, which is able to regenerate itself and create modular architecture and rebuild and support a diversity of life underwater, from ants, which show us and already are being used in algorithms, swarm intelligence and optimization of routes and efficiencies. Nature doesn't just optimize for a short-term gain. It doesn't just optimize for speed or scale. It optimizes for resource allocation, for balance, for diversity, for adaptability. Today, we are entangled in this polycrisis in which our technologies in many ways are accelerating these interconnected challenges that we face, driven by very short-term incentives of short-term profit maximization and of speed, 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 without really asking, what are we doing? What is our story? What is the story of our species, and why are we actually innovating in the first place? Now, companies today are already well underway with adapting and taking a page from nature. This is not just some grand vision. For actually about 10, 20 years now, companies have been using biomimicry to design their products. Maybe you might even be wearing some clothes or Velcro today that has been actually designed using inspiration from nature. From wind turbines to medical devices and shoes and so many other products, companies have been using the wisdom of the natural world to design their products for decades. But now what we're starting to see is the emergence of AI in this design process. When Airbus set out to redesign their airplane partition that separates, the cabin from the galley, they didn't just pick a lighter material. They used generative AI to ask nature. And they trained this AI on slime molds, believe it or not, a very, very proto-organism, but is actually one of the most efficient at navigating systems. And they also trained their algorithms on mammal bones, the incredible efficiency of weight bearing and strength and porousness. And the AI itself generated 10,000 design options, probably more than any one of us could generate, in order to iterate and adapt and adapt. And what they developed was a partition that was 45% lighter, but just as strong. And as a result, this prevents thousands of gallons of jet fuel from going into the atmosphere, and never mind the CO2 that's released from this. It's a systemic impact. Nature never just designs for one thing. It is multi-capital, it is multi-benefit, it is doing multiple contributions at the same time. What if our artificial intelligence could enable this from us? This example of just a single product is really the tip of the iceberg. The business implications of thinking systemically, designing with the natural world as integral to how we think about intelligence and the intelligences is just the beginning. When we look at the example of a tree, it is relational intelligence of all the other beings that it supports. It is economic intelligence of all of the resources and energy transfer. It is ecological intelligence, right? It is metabolic intelligence. It's all of these different kinds of ways of actually driving intelligence. And we're part of this system too, but the natural world is full of intelligence, right? And it goes even further. If the examples that I just offer are examples of products in the material world, what does it mean to actually intelligently design regeneratively? Or in other words, intelligently design in a way that contributes more to the ecosystems in which our businesses operate than we extract, to do more good than harm. So much of the paradigm today is a net zero, do less bad, see what we can get away with paradigm. What would it actually be to restore ecosystems as a function of doing business? And again, materiality is part of this. The metabolic system of our materials and products and devices is certainly part of this. And we see examples all over. Examples like companies, Ecovative, which is actually using AI to design specific recipes for fungi to grow new kinds of furniture. That's right, grow new kinds of furniture. Examples like Materium, which is a big data AI platform that supports the material design to shift us away from petrochemical-based plastics into biomaterials and bio-based, renewable, biodegradable materials that spans all kinds of different industries, plastics and far beyond. Even just the other day, the Biomimicry Institute, who has pioneered this question of biomimetic design, released a GPT, and now any designer can use this, based on their years and years of data and training and learning from the natural world. But it can't just be materially. When we think about how we can intelligently design in a more regenerative way, it's also a relationship story. It's a relationality, right? So much of our technology is pulling us away from one another. It's separating us from ourselves, our friends, our communities, the natural world. How can these intelligences, these AIs, these emerging intelligences, bring us back together? And there are brilliant examples of organizations working with indigenous societies around the world to bring in the latest in scientific consensus, millennia of their traditional wisdom, and the artificial intelligence to really learn and adapt to the local environment about coral restoration or land stewardship. And not only that, but driving, making sure that the information, their knowledge, and their data remain sovereign to their place, not just the ownership of OpenAI. So how do we use these technologies more relationally? And then also economically, right? How do we use our intelligences to develop new economic models? We're seeing examples all over of organizations, developing new asset classes that actually value new kinds of assets that otherwise aren't on the balance sheet, such as carbon credits, biodiversity credits, water credits, soil credits, new ways of organizing economically that allow for participatory governance. An example called Polis, an open source platform that uses AI not to drive division, but to drive consensus and identify ways that people are coming together around issue areas, driving consensus, participatory policy design, driving disaster response, the amazing example we heard earlier, as well as community resilience. Some of the most important needs that we have. AI can really help us with this to build these new models, these new ways of coming together economically, of new ways of coming together through governance. And even at the large corporate model, there's an organization called Natura & Company. Natura & Company, by its very existence, is supporting material, relational, and economic intelligence and innovation. This is a very large, multi-billion-dollar cosmetic company. And what they're doing is working with indigenous in the Amazonian rainforest to better support their local ecosystems, because that's where they get murumuru butter, which is the key ingredient in their cosmetic products. So simply by virtue of existing, this company is enabling this community economically. This is more profitable for them than is deforestation, as has been the business model for many years. It's also supporting the business. They're using this to drive more circular economy. They're using this for their own business success. It's an excellent example of an organization that is really thinking holistically across systems. And yes, they're using technology, but they're looking at how, by virtue of our own existence as an organization, these systems are benefited. These systems are supported ecologically and through their health. So there's a saying by Lynn Margulis, a famous ecologist, which is, life didn't take over through combat. It took over through networking. So I want to ask you all to hold a question. I want to ask you all to hold this question. What could be possible with the combining of intelligences, of our human ingenuity, nature's wisdom, and artificial intelligence? Where is this question from the AI conversation? What could be possible for our organizations? What could be possible for our economies? What could be possible for our communities, for our story as a species in the long game? So I want to leave you with a couple of final thoughts today that you can take back to your desk or to the dinner table or wherever it is. We as business leaders are designing the DNA of the next generation of systems, the next generation of digital systems, but all of our systems. The platforms that we build, the algorithms that we deploy, the investments that we make, we're writing the code of the kinds of systems that billions of people and life itself will live with. Now, the next frontier of technology is not just bigger, better, faster, stronger, cheaper, but it is also one in which we have an orientation of what are we innovating for? Are we innovating to perpetuate that selfie? Or are we innovating to create and regenerate the systems that support us? Remember, without regenerating our social and ecological foundations, the economy cannot run in perpetuity. If we want an economy for our children and our children's 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 children, it requires that we think in a way that supports multiple generations. To name the elephant in the room, if we think about our incentive structures, we're looking very closely. Just as Sagar said, this is a long game. The innovations of the future honor not just short-term returns, but also time, multiple generations. And when we think about our emerging intelligences, as I drive through San Francisco and I see on the billboards, we're capturing the world's wisdom. I can't help but think there's a lot more intelligence that we don't even know. And so when we think about our emerging intelligences, how do we move towards so much that we don't know yet? Have you ever used a GPT and been told, I'm not sure? So perhaps where nature meets code is a place where we recognize these multiple intelligences. A tree is ecological intelligence. A tree is relational intelligence. It's economic intelligence. It's social intelligence. It's energy intelligence. It's all of these things happening systemically at the same time. What if, imagine if this kind of intelligence was where our code supported us as a species and how we connect with the broader web of life. Perhaps that is where code meets nature. Thank you.